I'm Leela Singh, your podcast host, and I'd like to welcome you to the My Brand HQ podcast, all things personal branding for career acceleration. This podcast is for talented, ambitious career professionals like you who are wanting to be perceived as a thought leader, to be top of mind to those that matter, and to make an impact and stand out, be that in your team, your organization, or your industry, and to be inspired by other successful leaders. I will be interviewing high-achieving career professionals who have carved out a successful career in their field and are open to sharing their career journey, their challenges, their learnings and insights with you, someone who is looking to establish your personal brand and accelerate your career. Through my personal branding and coaching practice, I enable career professionals primarily in the technology industry to earn more money, to increase their salary. In fact, I spoke to all of my past clients that I've worked with over several years and learned that actually overall, they've received an average of 47% increase in their package. Would that be a great place to be? They've also all achieved at least one, if not more, promotions or moved on to a higher level in their career at another organization. And they're looking to advance their career while showing up as the best version of themselves. If this sounds like you, then do reach out to me and let's have a chat. And why do I do this? Well, during my corporate career spanning 25 years, I quickly realized that hard work alone was not enough to get me to where I wanted to be and the success that I strive for. And my belief is that hard work, coupled with creating and establishing a strong personal brand, can both influence and accelerate your career and get you to where you want to be. In today's My Brand HQ podcast, I'm going to be speaking with Ray McGann. Ray, a keen enthusiast and advocate of both coaching and training for careers and sports, is the head of IT asset management for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Financial Services across EMEA. With over 30 years in the financial services and asset management industry, Ray has held a variety of roles ranging from marketing, business development, and sales and business leadership positions across a range of both financial and technology companies. And he currently resides on the EMEA Leadership Team for HPE Financial Services. Ray is known for his ability to successfully lead remote teams, his willingness to take on multiple projects and responsibilities, always going over and above, and as a coach and a mentor to many. I've had the privilege to have Ray as my mentor during my career as a sales executive at HPE, and this makes today's interview even more special. In today's session, Ray will be sharing with us how self-belief is a core foundation for excelling in your career, why you want to be part of the talent pool within your organization, and that in the current environment that we're experiencing, that with change being a constant, how and why it is important to embrace and internalize change to succeed in business. Ray will also share the 3 pillars of mentoring that are essential to support you in raising your game, and the key ingredients and steps necessary for establishing a successful career and building powerful relationships. So let's head over and hear what Ray has to say. Good morning, Ray. How are you today? Welcome to the My Brand HQ podcast. How's it going?
Very good. Thank you, Leela.
It's great to have you here today. And I wanted to dive straight into the questions because I know there's great nuggets that you'll be sharing with us today. And I'd like to start with ask you, when you embarked on your career as a primary school teacher, what was it that had you take that leap of faith to change your career direction to sales and marketing and financial services?
Yeah, so it's a question I get asked over the years a lot because they're very different careers, and you know, what were the commonalities between, you know, a primary school teacher and somebody involved in sales and marketing. So initially it was, you know, a decision around, you know, looking at doing something different, you know, having qualified, having spent 5 years. So the first sort of all my 20s were involved in the education profession. So I was at that point in my career and at that point in an age group perspective where if you were going to do something different, it would be a good idea to have a look at that in your late 20s, maybe early 30s to start with. So I had that in the back of my mind that, you know, I would be interested in looking at other careers. I was aware of the financial services industry. People I know and family and friends are involved in that financial services industry. So when I was looking to change, I was looking to do something that I felt was a service that was needed in the community, was needed in industry and in business, that it had longevity, you know, because again, looking forward, I was keen to not invest my time in something that might be a short-lived type of product, or as much as you could see into the future. So that also kind of resonated, that it was a type of service offering that had a longevity to it, but also a very important service offering in terms of helping businesses grow and develop. Mm-hmm. And when I looked at it, the commonalities between the two was the communication, the ability to concisely deliver a message, have it understood by the recipient, and for them to understand what you need to do and how you need to engage. So there was an awful lot of commonality between what a good primary school classroom teacher can do and what a good sales and marketing person can do. It took me a while to really understand that because initially there didn't seem to be that much commonality between them. But over time I've learned, and as I go forward, I learn even more, that there's a huge basis, and it's all down into that communication layer. The ability to take a concept, break it into its components, make sure that whoever you're speaking with, whether it's your sales teams or whether it's your customers, understand the service offering in great detail in a way that is simple to understand, and then that they absorb it and then engage with you because they understand what you're trying to offer or what your service is. So it was a mixture of getting to an age profile, having a desire to try something new, and also looking at industry commonalities and long-term. So it was a mixture of all of those things that helped me say, right, take a shot. You know, at the end of the day, you know, once you have planned it through correctly, you can always change back. You can always revert and go to do something different if your first choice and your new choice hadn't worked out. And I think it's underpinned by, you know, belief in yourself. You know, if you believe in yourself that, you know, I can put in the effort, I can put in the work, I can really educate myself, I can learn my new industry, I have the intellect to be able to do that, and then you back yourself. And that's the kind of combination that gave me the courage to have a go.
I love that. That's great. And I totally agree with you there, because around the self-belief that you mentioned, and also the fact you took a very considered approach to what that next step was going to be. Yeah. But also recognizing the fact, well, it's almost like, well, what's the worst that can happen? You're going to do your due diligence, identify something, have that belief, and take the step forward. And for me, that was something similar that I did early on in my career. I had somebody just mention to me in passing, I was moving role as an accountant to a very different role. And then I started to get worried that I wouldn't be able to do this new role. Yeah. And she just said, she goes, we can do anything we put our mind to. And after that, I was like, it's so true. If you really want to do something, yes, it will take the work and the effort, but if we really...
and there's the combination, you know, having the intellect, having the experience, and, you know, anybody who has been able to learn, you know, whether it's in their secondary school or in their university, and have gone through and performed and achieved a certain benchmark education, you know, what is true to say is that you can learn, you know, so that's underpinned. The second piece you describe is that focus, that energy and commitment to learn the next trade, the next service offering, the next whatever it is you're into. Because if you want to have a new career, but you're not prepared to invest in the time and effort to do it, well, then the equation doesn't work. The mathematical equation just falls down. But if you do put in the work effort, if you do, you know, requalify if that's necessary, if you do put in that effort, then there is no reason why you won't be successful, other than that piece of self-belief where you think, no, I'm never going to achieve this. And I think there's a famous phrase by Mr. Henry Ford, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Indeed. Yeah. Very much so. And so in your case, with a solid track record of 30 years in finance and 20 of that within technology industry, what were your initial thoughts when you embarked on that career or into that world of technology?
Yeah, so the finance world, I had, a good solid 10 years involved in working with customers, developing facilities for customers to help them and their business grow along with our business grow. So various different financial institutions across some of the big brand names from GE Capital, Woodchester, and so forth. So I was very confident in my understanding of the financial services industry. Tech and the way technology funding operates was slightly different. And that in of itself was also attractive, that, okay, I'd done over 10, 12 years in regular financing, regular facilities. The idea that you'd look and invest and that you'd understand the technology that you're investing in and then put residual value investments into those products to yield outcomes at the end of the usage period was a different slant to the industry. Initially, people thought in discussions that it was too big a jump, between one type of financing and the new type or the tech-related financing. I didn't believe that at all. I thought it was, again, go back to the core principles of you learn a new industry, you understand it a bit more, you understand the level of complexity in there, and you do your due diligence, you do your homework. And then you say, okay, I have an understanding, self-belief that I can communicate to customers, I can understand this new product, I can explain to customers how it works. And therefore, I'm confident that I'll be as successful in the tech finance world as I had been in the regular finance world. And the first 6 months, like any 6 months in the new period, in the new role, in the new job or a new company, they were tough because you had to really dig deep. You had to really learn fast. You didn't have a honeymoon period. You literally had to hit the ground running. But I had that, as I said earlier, self-belief that understanding your marketplace, understanding the product you were going to sell, and having that commitment to go and put the effort in, all combined very nicely in tech. And as I said a little bit ago, I was really interested in changing that marketplace. So I didn't want to see another 25, 30 years doing what I had done in the regular finance community. The same kind of incentive that I had in my teaching career. I wanted to do something extra. I wanted to push the boundaries a little piece. Not quite as big a change from teaching into finance, but from finance, regular domestic financing and mortgages and home loans and so forth, into a tech was another jump. Not quite as big, but it was another jump. Yeah. And I was really keen to push myself to go and make that change.
So it sounds as though you look for the challenge. You like to stretch yourself and learn new things and see that growth both in yourself and the business around you.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And so tell me, given the current climate that we're in right now, change and uncertainty, and many people will be feeling unsettled and anxious at the moment, you've been working for an organization that has been through significant change over the years. So how do you manage to stay focused, to stay motivated, and to continue to drive the business forward with that uncertainty happening around you?
Yeah, no, I think what I would say is maybe this last 3 to 4 months or 5 months since March have been very different for everybody. I don't think anybody, certainly in my lifetime, has gone through a pandemic like this, which is universally unheard of before at this level. There hasn't been any other event that has made companies on a global scale respond differently to the marketplace. But what's consistent over all the years that I've been in the industry is there are always challenges. It may not be globally the same. It might be even very much locally different than the UK market versus the German market versus the French market versus the Irish or the US market. So there's always has been change, and I think that is the constant that people talk about. And I think part and parcel of what we as individuals need to do is understand that the constant is change. whether it's a change of role, whether it's a change of marketplace, whether it's a change of customer behavior, whether it's technology that has arrived, disruptive technologies that have turned on the marketplace, whether it's competitors that have changed. There hasn't been, and there won't be, a period in industry where those types of challenges arise. And therefore, I think underpinning all of us, that knowledge that you're not in a static, constant, normalized business that's going to always be the same is very important. Having that in your mindset to say, okay, there's a new challenge. And I think part of it is to understand what the challenges are, to be very active and very aware of what market changes are happening, and then understand what you as an individual and then as an organization need to do to respond to that. And typically, if you have internalized the changes, if you have understood the marketplace, if you've done your own research and you're listening to your colleagues and your peers and competitors, and you understand what the changes are, or you have understood to a degree what you need to do, then you are on a solid footing. And creating your own solid footing is not about saying I want everything to be the same. It's about, I now understand the model changes, I now understand the market movements, and I'm now ready for those. Or I have adjusted the way I think, the way I engage. And partly, if you think going back to the pandemic, the amount of companies that are now operating solely from their home offices, we didn't have that 6 months ago, 9 months ago. Customer engagements were done on face-to-face meetings, in meeting rooms, around boardrooms, in various different countries. Switching to having those customer meetings on Zoom or some other technologies, where using cameras like we are today, using face-to-face technologies, and getting comfortable with the medium, practicing the medium, engaging in the medium, trialing it with your colleagues, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable using, a video screen rather than a face-to-face, and creating a new dynamic. How do you make your customers comfortable that you would have done face-to-face? What type of discussions do you start a conversation with? What type of introductions do you do that you would have done differently face-to-face, because you're in the room? You're able to do different things. You're able to read body language differently. Facial expressions are different. So you've learned all of that over the 20 plus years in tech finance and 30 odd years all in. So you have to do a new learning. Mm-hmm. You have to work with colleagues to say, okay, let's trial these meetings. How do we present? What type of material do we use? Does the material change because you have a different audience? And all of those things become part of your new learning. And I think that's how personally and collectively, people I work with and teams I work with, we have adapted very quickly to the new norm. This is the new norm. And then you stabilize in terms of your materials, you stabilize in terms of your way you engage, how you're getting comfortable being uncomfortable with the new technologies. And then after a period of time, you find, well, actually, I can use this very effectively to help customers understand what we're trying to do. And the other thing I have found, which may or may not be true for others, is you have a much more willingness from an awful lot of customers to engage. They themselves are in the same situation. They're in a lockdown, so having engagements where when you have relevant content and relevant information to share with them, they're more than happy to join calls. And therefore, I think we've had probably more connections to customers than we might have done in the past. And the same for colleagues, because again, with standard process, an awful lot of people would travel to see customers, to meet partners, and therefore the availability to meet and collaborate had been maybe, not as great. Now that people are predominantly working from home, you have a little more time and I think a lot more willingness to engage in the new medium. So I think it's a combination of always being aware that there is no standard, that constant change is part and parcel of industry, and that's going to continue, and being comfortable with that.
Embracing that change.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you talk there a lot about the way things have changed now and evolved, that it's a different way or a different approach of building those relationships, particularly with your customers. So tell me, what level of importance do you give to building a strong network or that professional relationship around you? And what are the benefits of that, do you feel, towards a successful career?
Yeah, I think, you know, a network, a professional network is a key ingredient in success. And I think it goes to, you know, there's some fundamentals, you know, the product you're selling, the service you're selling, being an expert, you know, being a subject matter expert in it, understanding it fully, you know, all the ramifications of it, how it works, how it impacts their P&L, how it impacts their balance sheets, you know, what alternative products are in the marketplace, and why what we're offering or what you're offering as a service provider is unique and different or more beneficial. So mastering your subject is the key, is one of the key ingredients. You know, it isn't good enough just to say, well, you know, if I get on well enough with these colleagues and these people and these customers, then we're going to have the success I need. You know, that's naive. You really do have to understand the fundamentals of your industry and the fundamentals of your offering and how it matches off. And, you know, I think over the years, I've been fortunate that a lot of time and effort has been invested in educating us as sales communities and salespeople, and developing our knowledge of our product and our competitors' products, and understanding how it all works and how we compete and where we compete best. So that's a fundamental building block. You have to master your subject. Subsequently, then, in terms of the relationships with people, you know, finding the right person inside the organization you're dealing with, understanding to whom this matters, you know, spending time with somebody in an organization that the product or service you're offering has no impact, no interest, is obviously a waste of time. However, some salespeople over time and colleagues feel, well, I got speaking to company X and I was talking to, you know, person Y, I'm making headway. You may well have made some headway, but you have to be very honest with yourself and go, well, this person isn't empowered or in a position to, you know, accept, buy, sign off, agree to the product I'm selling. So whilst they may be important, you need to really understand who are the decision makers and how do I use my connections and contacts to get connected to the relevant persons. Also, in terms of those, let's say, initial engagements, getting from them and working from them to understand how that organization hears and receives information. What do they think? What's the way they think today? What's their current, you know, methodologies? So using the connections that you have to understand the customer fully. So you do your online research, again, go back to research. You understand the company's ethos, you understand their public domain statements, you understand what they're trying to achieve as a company. So you have that knowledge, and then you're trying to ensure that you match off what you have to offer with what they are trying to achieve. And using those first relationships to understand the company a bit better, and then also understand the people inside the company who are the real decision makers. But also, what kind of people are they? You know, what way do they want to receive information? So you're now into the personal interchanges. And some people know that, you know, Tom or Mary or X, they receive information, you know, statistically. They're just statistic people. They just need black and white. They don't need the story. They don't need the background. This is all they're going to focus on. Or this other person in the food chain is more a person who understands, I need to understand the color and the context. So you need to do that extra research. And then when you are working with the said in context, that you're delivering the messaging to them in a way that they want to receive it and connect to the data, connect to the story, connect to the opportunity. And all of that takes work. All of that takes analysis. All it takes to understand your opposite number. Once you create those relationships and you form the basis that I can speak to him or her and they know that I'm going to give information to them in a way that they want to receive it, you find that they will then come back to you, that they will say, okay, I trust the information I get from this person. I trust and can invest my time in that relationship. So it becomes a mutually beneficial relationship. So it's having the basics, having the understanding of the company, having done the research, having mastered your own product, connecting to the right level, connecting to people to help you find the right levels inside the organization. So it's a long process, and it's not, just let me have a chat, let me have a conversation. They're just going to love what we have to offer. It's far deeper, far wider, and the relationships then based on, I can trust this person. I know they know what they're talking about. I know they understand their product. I know that if we invest with this team or this community or this company, we will have what we expected. I understand the way it works. I understand how the operations work, so that you've really helped the customer who's acquiring the service to understand the nuts and bolts. So it's not like high level, hey, just sign this and everything is perfect. These are the steps. These are the things we need to do. This is how I need our operations to tie with your operations. And as we go forward, we'll need to make those relationships work, so that in the normal course of business, there are always teething problems when you set up new contracts, new customers, new engagements. But having preempted that and having told people these are the things that are going to occur and these are the challenges we should potentially meet and here's how we should deal with them, you just reinforce, I've made a good decision to come with this company. And that reinforcement goes back to the person that you've dealt with then thinks, I've connected to the right people inside the service offering. Yeah. So it's a very complex process, and it's not just, well, people buy from people, and that is an easy sentence. It's a very simple sentence, and it's true. But people buy from people who have done the research, done the investment, who have committed themselves to it, and have made the assurance and have gone that extra yard to ensure that the buyer has actually got full understanding of what's going to happen, and it plays out pretty much as you've said. That then builds confidence, that builds assurance, which then is a long-term relationship that exists and goes with you through changes and moderations. It stays with you because they believe in you as an individual and your company as a service provider.
Yeah, I love the way you've broken that down. And I figured you're the best person to ask that question, because I know how this is one of your biggest strengths. And what I've heard there essentially is mastering your topic, being the subject matter expert, which means going over and above to really understand what you're offering, understanding your own business, but then also doing the research, the due diligence on your client or your prospect, understanding their needs, but also meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
And then understanding the dynamics of the individual, because we've all got different profiles, as you said, of the way we receive information, whether it's top level or it's the nth detail.
Correct.
Getting to learn and understand, recognize that, so we can build those connections quicker and people actually resonate. Yeah. Thank you for that. And so tell me, do you have a role model that has influenced your career?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate over the years, and and I kind of would break it into two components or a couple of components. One would be, people I have worked for and worked with that I have admired, and I've been very fortunate over the years to have worked for large companies, medium and large companies, and some global companies, where you've met really good managers, really good either colleagues that are within the organization. So from a hierarchical perspective, maybe the same level as you, or maybe levels that are not the same, higher or lower, but you've met very talented people. So to me, the kind of categorization is when you work with a lot of talent, either in your own teams or around your organization, it's inspirational. You get that feedback, you get that energy from smart people who understand what they're doing, and you gravitate towards those people. And I certainly found over the years that you find yourself gravitating and attracted to people who have a really good understanding of what they're doing, very strong in their mastery of their subject, great SMEs when you need more detail, great people who are prepared to share. And again, it goes back to that relationship building. The internal relationships within your own organization are as critical in any sense as those externally with your clients and customers. But you find out you seek out those people who have that knowledge and have that willingness to share and help educate. So I found that as a very strong support for my career and my personal development, that you have those types of people in your organization. Then, as I've said, I've had the the pleasure and the privilege of having some really exceptional bosses, all of whom had, a very high expectation in terms of what they expected from me from my output, in terms of the knowledge that I would have of my product or my particular segment of the business, and how I would represent those pieces in senior leader meetings and business reviews, and they've held a very high standard of expectation, and that's been very helpful, because it has meant that you've had to elevate your own game. You've had to learn how to have different messages, one for your team, one for people who work with you, and then another message for people who are in a more senior job and senior roles, and understanding that their maybe time frame is more limited, their knowledge of your business segment might be a little less than so your ability to give a concise message to the senior leaders so that they get the essence of the thing, and if they want to ask more questions they can, but they get what they needed to know. Learning that over time has been a fantastic education. And then externally, I've been fortunate from relatively early on to have sought out somebody outside of the organizations that I've worked with who could help benchmark and help hold up a mirror to decisions that I was making or looking at, and make it more about, well, here's what the wider industry would imagine the move you're looking to make seems like. You're locked in your own little bubble. You've got your own ideas as to whether or not this is a good move I'm looking to make. Moving from a job to a different company or a different job within a company, you have a very limited view, even though you think you've done all the research. Having somebody to be able to stand back and say, let me just play this back to you. Let me run what you're describing back to you in a different fashion. Do you still feel, having done that, do you still feel you're making the right decision, or do you feel you have the right information to make the right decision? Are there areas that you should do more research in? Are there questions you should be asking that you haven't asked? And maybe you're not comfortable asking, but your jigsaw is not full. You don't have all the pieces. You're missing key pieces. So having been fortunate to seek out somebody and work with somebody on a frequent enough basis, that I found that really helpful. Somebody that could stand apart, not so immersed in your day-to-day life as to get confused wood for trees scenario, but somebody who could stand back and go, yeah, what you're saying makes sense. A couple of things I'd like you to double down or research a bit more, and then once you've that done, we can then have a chat about the decision you're looking to make. So I'm using the three types. One is the internal colleagues that you're learning from that have great mastery of the subject. Two is leaders and direct bosses that I've been really fortunate to have very high standard, very knowledgeable people, held a very high standard, held me to account to a high standard. And sometimes people might look at that and go, I wish I didn't have it. I can assure myself as well as anyone else that without it, you don't do and you don't learn and you don't grow. You really do have to have somebody who's prepared to bring you and stretch your capabilities and push you beyond your boundaries that you felt you had. And then the third piece is the external view to help, have that mirror image, that mirror up to you to say, from a distance, I can see a different landscape. So I think the combination of those three is what I would have seen as very important over the career.
And so would you be advocating that people in their career, at whatever stage they're at, should be ensuring they have those people around them? So the mentors, absolutely, whether internal, external, same level, next level.
Absolutely, because with the best will in the world, we only see it from our vantage point. And however well educated that is and however well researched that is, you're coming from your vantage point. So having colleagues and or senior leaders internally within an organization that you can get perspective from is very important. And then that external perspective, that external mentor, as well as maybe the internal, the external one just gives you a different flavor. It gives you the ability to have their industry knowledge or their vantage being completely different and not connected to the day-to-day machinations of your job, not the day-to-day trials and tribulations. They're able to stand away from it and go, okay, all that happens, company A, company B, company C, all that noise happens in every job. So walking past that, let's look at the fundamentals and the big picture. So I think the combination of those three gives you a rounded view rather than solely one or the other, or picking one of the three and saying, right, that's my future. To me, you need the three.
Yeah, because they've all got their different perspectives of view as well. And I love the fact that you mentioned about having people around you who hold you to a higher standard. And I've been very fortunate actually in my career to have those people around me. I was privileged to work for you, Ray, and other people who were my directors as well, and people around me who had those high expectations, who pushed me. And as you rightly touched on, people often don't like that because they're being challenged, they're being pushed out of their comfort zone possibly. Right. But I thrive off of that because if someone's having those expectations of you, there's almost an element of belief, and therefore it leads you to want to prove them right, but prove yourself that yes, you are more than capable. And I think finding those kinds of people around you, whether it is your manager or whether it is the mentors that are going to push you, it's really important to help you to grow and to stretch yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so tell me, what one question do you ask yourself when you've got a big decision to make, or you're in a position where you may need to take a risk? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I don't think it's any one question. I think it's a series of activity, again, depending on what the question is and depending on what is at stake. Again, it goes back to, well, what are the pros and cons of a particular choice, doing that discipline of writing your pros and cons list. And also then having your pros and cons list validated with that external mentor or the internal mentor or the internal guidance, so that you have done your own research, you've done your own homework, you've gone through the decision you're trying to make and the risk you're trying to address, and you've done that basic work of here's the benefits of doing the change or making the change, here's the downsides of it, here's the risks associated with it. And getting those as realistic as you can, because again, we can fool ourselves very easily. We can write nice things about, hey, it would be nice to do this because these are all the nice things associated with the change or with a new opportunity. And here's all the bad things about what I do today and I'd like to not to have to do in the future. And that's not realistic. That's, a fanciful view of what might be the case. So when you do your pros and cons, being extremely realistic, certain aspects of all roles will have similarity no matter whether you're in A or B or C job, in A or B or C company. So doing the research and understanding the real benefits and the real risks, then having that conversation externally or with somebody that you trust that can be, again, a little bit less connected, a little bit further back from the day-to-day ingredients, that they can also look at your assessments and go, yeah, I'm not sure why you put this in as a negative. I see it as a positive, or I'm not sure why this is a positive because I still see that as a negative. So, having that external challenge to the way you've thought through something. And then when you have all that put together, one of the key ingredients, and we talked about it a little earlier, is, well, what is the downside? What's the worst case scenario? And I was fortunate, again, as I've said earlier, having worked for large companies over time, to have been put on and gone through development courses. And one that I remember in the earlier part of the 2000s was all about, how you develop yourself as a person, and how you look at risk and risk assessments. And that whole idea of, well, what is the worst case? If this went completely wrong in whatever measurement wrong is, what are the downsides? What is the worst case outcome? And then, okay, now that you know that, what would your mitigation be? How would you mitigate against that being the case? Mm-hmm. And how would you avoid that being the ultimate case? And once you know that, you say, well, okay, now I know what I'm risking. I really understand that at great level. And therefore, I'm now making a decision with full eyes wide open. And if it does go wrong, I know what my mitigation strategy is going to be. I know what I'm going to do to safeguard certain aspects. Or it could go the whole way and I might have to have a different reality. but I have now made a decision with my pros and cons, with my worst case scenario fully understood and described for myself and others to ensure that I'm being realistic. And then you now have a perfect platform to make a decision. So either say yes to something new or different, or say, no, that's not appropriate at this time. So again, it kind of goes back to a basic, do the research, understand the marketplace, understand the new opportunity in it as much as you can, and be realistic about your pros and cons assessments, and then have that validated again so that you just have a different vantage point. Have your understanding of the worst case outcome, and then you then have a fully fledged decision-making process done. And that's what I've always done over the years. And I've been fortunate to have learned that early, that that's how you make a decision.
Yeah. Nice. Very nice. And again, I like the way you've assimilated that for others. That will really be invaluable for people who are in that position, who have those decisions to make and almost don't know which way to turn. So thank you for sharing that. And tell me, how can effective communication influence your career, do you believe, in terms of how do you go about refining it to be most effective in the way people understand you, people interact with you?
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to one of the earlier comments we made about the commonality between the teaching industry or the education industry and where I am now and in the general industry. You know, the underlying communication is the commonality, is the key thread through all of the years and all of the industry types. Again, we spoke about it earlier, really understanding the person with whom you're engaging, understanding the way they receive and absorb information. And that takes time and effort. You know, unless you want and you're not interested in being effective, then you'll just deliver as you feel. You just give the information, and you'll just say, hey, over to you, I hope you got it. But if you want to be an effective communicator, you try and understand as much as you can how an individual is going to receive. So you make and modify your information, and you modify the communication to the recipient. Now, if you're communicating to a large audience and you don't have the ability to understand each nuanced person in there, what you're looking for is, okay, if I was in an audience and if me and my team were in an audience and we were hearing this first time, what is it that we want? What are the key messages? If this 200 people or 1,000 people or 5,000 people, as I've had privilege to speak to over time, if they walk out of here, the end of this period, half hour, whatever might be, what do I want them to take away? What few things do I want them to walk out the door and say, this is what I remember from that conversation? And teaching yourself to bring it down to what might be called the irreducible minimum, making sure that when they walk out, they have this in their heads. So, you know, you're 5,000 people or 1,000 people in the audience, or 100 people or 5. What do I want any one of them to walk away with? So that's when you're in the wider communication. You're not on one-to-one or one-to-two, but you're on a one-to-many. So to me, that's a critical component of a one-to-many. What are those few things I want them to walk away with? In the one-to-ones, it's almost the same. I want this individual to remember what. I want this individual to understand what, so that when he or she is finished and they move on to the next meeting, or they meet the competitor, or they meet whoever, that they still say, yeah, but I really remember this from having met this person. Yeah. And I bought into this. I understand this very well. And then it goes back to a little bit what we said earlier, or what I described earlier, is that bringing it to its components, so that you've demystified whatever service offering you have. You've created a very clear understanding of the steps and the process steps, and that they understand, if I engage, this is what will happen. So you've made it very easy to understand. You've taken all the jargon out where you can, out of your communication, so that it's plain English, plain communication, easy to understand, easy to follow the direction, easy to follow the next steps. And then you've done what you can. You've created a very simplistic, easy to understand methodology. You've matched off the individual as much as you can. You've learned who it is you're meeting and the kind of way they engage and what they like to hear and like to see. And you put that effort in. And I think that's probably, rather than the one thing, I think it's a combination of those kind of things. And then distinguishing between the two types of audiences, the one-to-many versus the one-to-one.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And tell me, what advice would you give to people who are wanting to accelerate their career?
Yeah, first of all, I would say, there's a couple of things in that. One would be, in your current job, have you mastered it? So I've over the years, I've had an awful lot of very talented people work with me. And often people would say, I want to do more, I want to do X, I want to do Y, I'd love to move on and get a new job, or I'd love to go for that job that's been advertised. And one of my conversations with them is, well, have you mastered your own? As a company person as well as an individual, has the company got from you all of the return they should have gotten, because you've been in the job you've been trained, educated, you've been supported. The company has every right to expect a return. It's straightforward. So, I'm in it 9 months, I've mastered it, I'm ready to go. Well, actually, yeah, that's not really the case. You haven't done one full cycle of a year. You haven't done one planning cycle. You've barely really understood your role. So it's quite likely that you have a lot more to learn, that there's more in this process, and that you need to spend more time mastering your current role. Doesn't mean I don't think it's that I would thwart anybody's ambition, but I do think we have to be realistic and say, yeah, I think it's a great idea to have an ambition. I think it's fantastic to have started the process of thinking, but you need to be absolutely mastering your current level, being able to validate that, so that when you do go to interview process, last thing in the world you want is for somebody to ring your existing boss and to do a conversation with them to say, well, what do you think? Well, he really doesn't master his current job. That's never going to be a platform for the next one.
Yeah.
So I think being realistic at the outset about where you are in your current role. Secondly, looking at the future roles, the advice I would give to people is, again, do you understand the role fully? Are you fully qualified for that role? Are there parts of that role that you're not qualified on, and that would be a disadvantage to you, or would put you behind, the leading candidate, because you don't have experience in X, Y, or Z? And what can you do in the interim to gain that experience? Whether it's projects, whether it's volunteering to support that part of the business on an extended hour basis, doing extra work, volunteering for projects inside that field of endeavor, and putting that on top of your shoulders on your existing job, to stretch yourself more, so that you do learn and close that knowledge gap that you might have had otherwise. And that's kind of the next piece of the jigsaw. Then obviously, that volunteering for other works, for projects, is a way of flagging your interest to the organization, so that you're not sitting there, very talented, extremely smart person, waiting for the company to find you, waiting for the diamond to be found in the rough, but that you're actually going out of your way to make it clear to the organization that, yeah, I want to master my existing role, and I am going to master my existing role, but I am interested in the medium to long-term future. I do want to expand my value to the company and to myself. And I want to do projects to extend myself and grow into other areas. And then you're on the radar. You've then created visibility of your desires, visibility of your capabilities. And when you do these projects, my comments to a lot of people over time is, when you do that project, don't do it half-heartedly, because that is by far more damaging than not doing it at all.
Yeah.
But you do have to close the knowledge gap and the skill gap. So go and invest time and effort. Deliver on that project as much as you can, not to the detriment of your existing role, but so that when the new organization or the other part of the organization consider you in the medium term, that they go, yeah, do you remember that project that Tom or Mary were involved in? They really were very good. They really understood what we were trying to do. So you've created that positive environment around you, that positive feedback around you. So when you do formally apply, they go, yeah, listen, that person really kind of gets what we're trying to do here. So you've engineered through your own efforts, you've changed and you've closed your skill gap. you have, or your knowledge gap, you have delivered in your own existing role at a very high level, and you have, connected to people where they've seen you in action, for want of a better word. And to me, they're all part of career development. It isn't simply, oh, there's a job over there, I'd apply for it. That rarely, and you hear the expression, I'm sure you've heard it and I've heard it, and people will continue to hear it, the job is already gone.
Yes.
Well, the job is already gone invariably to somebody who has already done what I've described. They've gone above and beyond. They've stretched themselves. They've put themselves out. They've, invested time and effort to grow and learn that particular new segment of the industry or area of the company. And they have put those building blocks in place. So it isn't the case that the job's already gone. It makes obvious sense that that person would get it because they've put the effort in, versus the person who is the diamond sitting in the rough waiting for the company to discover them. And that happens from time to time, but rare. It's more the people who have put the effort in and put the building blocks in.
And where you talked about having the experience and developing that experience, are you open to the possibility that there are situations where people may not have 100% of the requisite experience of a job spec? However, based on their capabilities, their attitude, their track record, that they would still have the opportunity to be considered for.
So I think, if it's one of those scenarios, and again, go back to, you're in an organization and you're looking at your talent pool. And again, I think in most large organizations, medium and large organizations, the concept of talent pool is very well developed. So if I'm in a particular role, I want to do it as really good as I can. I want to be considered in the talent pool, because if I am, to your question, Leela, you then will be considered, because your particular line manager or your area manager or whatever it might be, he or she will say, well, Leela's or Ray, they're really good at this. They've really excelled in this current role. And you know what? Go back to my earlier comment about have they put enough time in the current role? They're only in it 6 months. So look, I don't think they're ready yet for the next move. And that's part of being realistic in terms of looking at a new role. If you've not really been there long enough and you haven't invested yourself in the current role, many organizations will say, okay, not this time, but maybe next. But going to assume that we have spent the time and we have put in the effort and you have achieved and you've pushed yourself to a level where you're in a talent pool inside your particular segment of the business, then you've put yourself in play. You've put yourself in that pool of people that will get considered for the new role. Even if the skills, like you said, are not quite 100% or they haven't been matched exactly with the new role. What will stand to you is, well, you came into job 1 or job 2, you've learned it, you've mastered it, you're now a significant contributor in that space. They won't want to lose you, but they understand that career development is critical for a company, so they'll be prepared to allow you move on. You're now very definitely in the talent pool. You'll be in the review pool. And then it's down to, how much you can convince the people you're looking to work with that this part of the journey is not just because it's a different pay grade or just because it's got a different badge on it, but it's something that you really feel you can contribute. Because at the end of the day, the company is looking for that balance between what your rewards and recognition are going to be versus what the company is going to achieve and the return the company is going to get. So understanding all of that is part of the mix. And I think an awful lot of people in companies don't work what I've described out in their heads. And they just say, I like that prize, I want to go for it. Yes. And they don't understand then why it doesn't quite work out.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And so tell me, we're all very aware that there's a lack of women within the technology industry, whether it's in tech roles or non-tech roles, but within that industry itself. So what would you say to encourage more women to consider the industry for their career?
Yeah, I think there's, diversity in its fullest extent is important. And that's, beyond gender, it's in all aspects of human endeavor and human input. And I think it is important that every organization really looks at diversity in a very deep and meaningful way, because I think what you get, the richness you get from having a very diverse group of people work together, is you get that, what I described earlier, where you've got the external sort of view of the organization. You have that mirror coming up, you have that perspective. When you have a diverse workforce, you have the benefit of people saying, yeah, I don't quite see it the way you did. So you've got a more, it's a more difficult, let's say, environment in one level, because it'd be nice if everybody thought the same. Well, we just do this, and we do this concept of your group think. Yeah, that's the answer, let's go.
Yeah. And
you haven't actually really had anybody challenge your thoughts, anybody say, hey, yeah, don't think it's landing the way you think it's landing. And with diversity, you really create that richness, so that when the final output is decided upon, you have a much better communication device, you have a much better product, you have a much better engagement, because you've used the talents and experiences of a wider community of people. In terms of, specifically, females in the tech industry, I think it's like any industry. It's about your knowledge, it's about your understanding, it's about the homework you've done, it's about the research you've done. And I think that's gender agnostic. It is about, how do you help your customers? How do you communicate to your customers to help them with their business journeys? And I think, there is no question that that's gender agnostic. It doesn't matter. What does matter is, do you understand the customer? Do you understand what their objectives are? Do you really understand where they're trying to move their marketplace? What are they trying to achieve? And what is it that you have in your service or your product that helps that customer do that? And I think there are no reasons why any gender is better at that than the other. I think traditionally, maybe over the years, in education particularly, there's a whole concept around STEM and the maths, education, science subjects. And there is I think, an inbuilt, over a long time, a bias towards, well, certain subjects suit men or boys better than girls. Completely irrelevant, completely incorrect, and a bias that's been built over a long time that takes time to change. And you can see companies like HPE and other large tech companies really looking to support industry or education and universities to make the science subjects agnostic to gender, and make the science subjects appealing to any and all genders, and to all races and all ethnic backgrounds, because it has a rich, it is a very rich industry in terms of the experiences, in terms of how you can help companies. The equipment and service that are provided by tech companies are really leading edge. So I think it's, on the tech industry's side, it's really beneficial to widen the appeal of the industry, to attract as much talent as possible, because it needs that talent to continue to deliver at the levels it is and will continue. But I absolutely think there are steps that education need to take, universities and secondaries and primary schools, and changing the focus and the bias towards types of subjects to ensure that anybody coming out of secondary school or university have a rounded education and have an unbiased view of the topics and products in there, whether it's math, science type services or topics. And then industry to continue to try and attract and make it clear that there are absolutely open to and desire to have a very broad-based community working for them. And I think that's probably changed in the last 5 or 6 years, or maybe 6, 7 years. A lot to do yet, but I think it is down to an awful lot of individual parents, individual teachers, mentors, like I've described, to really talk to the to women and young girls as they're looking at career choices. And a bit like you described when you were leaving your accounting all that time ago, for somebody to say to you, yeah, look, of course you can do it. Of course you can do it. Why wouldn't you? and that challenge has to start early in a person's life, whether it's male or female or whatever background they have. Somebody challenging the individual at a medium age or an early age to say, why couldn't you do honours maths or maths at university level? Why wouldn't you? You're very good at it. Yeah, well, it's not really a subject. No, of course it is. And those interventions aren't just industry's responsibility. They're the whole gambit of community, from parents to teachers to your early career advisors to your mentors to your first jobs that you get. That whole ecosystem is really responsible for challenging and saying, like we said earlier, having a boss that challenges you. My bosses over time haven't challenged me because I was a male. They've challenged me because I was in a role, and that role could be expanded and done better and at a higher level. So it had nothing to do with gender per se. It had everything to do with the role in front of me. And I think we all have that role to play, so whether you're talking to young lady or young girls, or I'm talking to a schoolroom of children in various different guises, it's up to us to help you understand that there are no limits. This is not something you have to shy away from, but you have to do the work, you have to do the energy, you have to put in the hard slog, whether you're male or female or whatever background you're from. Yes. Just because you're of gender A or gender B doesn't mean it's easy.
Correct.
Yeah.
Ray, I would like to sincerely thank you for taking time out. I know how busy you are, and I really, really appreciate your time. It's been spectacular to talk to you today and to have you sharing so many valuable nuggets of information for our audience.
Very welcome, Leila. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please do subscribe to the show so you don't miss any future episodes. And remember to leave a review telling us about your key learnings and what you enjoyed the most. And do share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can spread the word on the importance of personal branding when it comes to your career advancement. And also ensure that others can benefit from these invaluable insights from many inspirational leaders. I will be eternally grateful. And if you are looking to earn more money, to get promoted, to secure your next role and advance your career, and would like me to support you personally on that journey to get you there, then reach out to me and let's arrange a chat. Alternatively, why don't you check out my personal branding launchpad, a group training and mentoring program. Finally, if you'd like to connect with me directly, then do reach out and direct message me on LinkedIn. You can find the link as well as any other resources mentioned in the show notes. I'll see you next time.